getting your spark back doesn't really require necessarily blowing up your life. Sometimes it's noticing the small things that you're doing and quietly choosing yourself instead of choosing everyone else or these like perceived things that you have to do. It's really just one decision at a time. Hello, and welcome back to the EmpowerHER Podcast. I realized that at some point in the last year, I built the exact life I left corporate to escape. What do I mean by this? My flexible schedule that I left corporate for was no longer flexible. Working from home became refusing to work anywhere else. And freedom that had somehow become rigidity. And I wasn't living small because someone was forcing me to. I was doing it to myself. So, some of the things that I realized, I was not doing as many social plans with my friends. I was saying I had to work when really, did I have to or did I think I had to? I wasn't going on trips or feeling anxious about going on trips and leaving work. I was only showing up for things when I felt 100% prepared and put together. I created deadlines in my head that literally didn't exist. I was available 9 to 5, all during the 9 to 5 and beyond, even though the whole point was that I didn't have to be available at all times. And, this summer, starting this summer, I guess we're haven't officially started summer, but I'm considering this as the start of summer. I decided that I'm done. This is enough, and I'm going to get my spark back because I do think it had to do with kind of my spark, and I was focused on work and putting this cage around me. And what I realized through this process is that I was people-pleasing again. I was going back to my people-pleasing tendencies. I was trying to people-please myself, and I really want to move away from that. So, what does living small in general actually look like? I want to talk about this from a perspective of my experience in this situation, what I learned, and getting my spark back, and slowly getting my spark back, and kind of how you can use this in your life as well. So this is, a pattern, the people pleasing and the living small and caging myself. This was something that I really learned in therapy about myself when I would go. And, it doesn't always mean living small doesn't look like what we think it is, right? It's not always staying in a bad job or tolerating a bad relationship, right? I was doing none of those things anymore. I'd graduated from those things. Sometimes it just looks like success on the outside and quiet contradiction on the inside. And for me, what it looked like is, I'd left corporate, I built a business, I was, I'm working freelance, and I felt like it was a prison. And again, I don't say this lightly, I'm not trying to compare it to a prison, but I just felt like I was in this cage that I put myself in. And I felt that this life that I had built specifically to be flexible was becoming extremely rigid. And I really felt like, I was opting out of social life. I felt like, it was becoming too much. I wasn't spending as much time with friends. I would feel stressed if I had to see my friends because I would be away from work. My body image stuff was coming up again, which, was making me feel like I couldn't say yes to things. So it wasn't just about work. It was kind of all of these things. That's why I'm talking about it from the perspective of getting my spark back, because that's really what I want to talk about, not just about work. And I think that that's, can be more relevant to everyone because not everyone works freelance, obviously. And, the point here is that this is all a form of people pleasing, right? And we talk about people pleasing as saying yes to everyone, but there's another version where you say no to everyone, including yourself, to avoid discomfort of being seen, being spontaneous, and being imperfect. And that's still people pleasing. You're still making decisions based on fear of how things will land. It's just an internalized version. So, this is hopefully our last summer before we have a big move. And that's really kind of what I was thinking about. Is okay, this is the last full summer we'll have here before we move. We have so many friends. I love summer in Europe. It's so beautiful. Like I always say, summer in Europe is just the vibe. It's just whatever. And you don't have to be like, on the Amalfi Coast or Saint Tropez to feel these amazing things. Like anywhere in Europe, there's just like a different vibe in the air. Everyone's so happy. The weather's nice. Everyone's sitting outside. Like it's just such a beautiful vibe. And I just felt like this is our last summer. Like I just want to have the best summer ever. I don't want to look back and regret something or regret not spending time with people or not being outside, quote unquote, literally and figuratively. And I just felt tired. And I remember expressing this, I think, to my husband. I said, I just want to feel joyful, which kind of sounds sad saying it that way. Not that I'm an unhappy person, because I'm not an unhappy person, but I just felt like, I've created such like a rigid life and my day to day is super rigid. And, I'm going through a lot of health things. And so a lot of my life is planned around that, right? Meal prepping, getting enough sleep, which affects, social plans sometimes, and going to the gym, which can affect, time I spend on other things. Like there's just so many factors. And so it's what I was really thinking is like, okay, how can I still have all these things and find balance, but also feel like I don't have to be so rigid in everything that I do, because I do feel that it was negatively impacting me. And again, like I see people, and I don't want to compare myself to people on social media, but there's a couple people, one in particular, and she just is like always smiling and happy. And like she has a daughter, and she just always looks so joyful. And I'm sure they have their problems, and I'm sure her child, has tantrums and all of those things. But just in general, she just looks and feels so joyful. And I'm like, I just want to feel joyful. Like and maybe this is sad to admit this, but I'm generally a very positive person. Like my outlook on life is very positive, but I wouldn't consider myself a joyful person. I feel a lot of burden on my shoulders. I take a lot of responsibility for things, whether it's in my personal life, my work, with my family. I think a lot of eldest daughters can relate to that. I'm eldest daughter, type A, Aries with the Leo rising. Like I like to get shit done. I take a lot of responsibility on my back, on my shoulders. I always want to make sure everyone's feeling good. I, work with clients in coaching, and my goal is always to make them feel good and to help them and support them. So overall in my life, I do feel this like big burden, a lot of pressure on me. And so I think it is hard to be joyful and carefree, because it almost feels like those two things can't exist at the same time. And, I think they can. I just think I felt that way, that they couldn't exist at the same time. And I really just wanted this summer to be joyful. I wanted to have, and I told my husband, I'm calling it a sexy summer. I'm like, this is a sexy summer, and not necessarily in the traditional sense of like physically being sexy. Although, I do want to step into my feminine energy more, like my feminine power in terms of like my body. So that is something that I'm working on, but I want to be present. I want to be magnetic. I want to be joyful. I want to actually enjoy my life and not just focus on work and responsibilities, because I do have this like heavy feeling on a day to day that like 5-6 days of the week are spent on all my quote unquote responsibilities. And that can be really stressful. And I want to talk about a decision I made that was causing me a lot of stress. So by the time this comes out, it won't be a surprise anymore. So I don't want my sister to know, but I am surprising my sister for her birthday. And this was an idea that my dad came up with last minute, of course, which in and of itself stresses me out that things are done last minute. It was like literally like 5 weeks before. And like I live in Europe, San Diego's quite far comparatively. So, it's not as easy to do that. And when he brought this up, like obviously like my sister and I are very close. I would do anything to be with her. But I felt this immense stress, panic, this like feeling of like, oh my God, how am I going to make this work? Even though I literally set up my life so that I could travel, so that I could do things last minute, right? And so that I could just get up and go. And I remember I was just so stressed by the situation. And even within the confines of the situation, I was trying to determine, okay, what days would I fly? How could I do this with work? Okay, but I'm flying on a work day. Then how could I make this work? And I was feeling so stressed about a given like dates that I had in my head of when to travel. And I realized like, oh, I could change the dates. I could try looking at plane tickets for a different date. And I moved the end date over one day and it gave me better options. It was better all around. It was a better price. Like all the things were better. And I was like, oh, I was just putting myself in a cage rather than being flexible and trying to see my different options. And that's just like a small example, but of where I felt like I was literally putting myself in a cage and I like couldn't move forward. And, another thing is saying yes to friends weekend away. I'm at the point now with my work, different than corporate, is that no one does my work for me when I'm on vacation, right? I have to do my work either before or after. That's just, it is what it is. And so going on vacation stresses me out because, as in when I say vacation, I mean taking time off work. Like I travel and then I just work while I'm there. Like if I go to San Diego, which at this point I would have already been there when this episode comes out, like I'm going to work the whole time, right? Like I will be. But I'm talking about like taking vacation, like actual days off. Like in corporate, I had 4.5 weeks off and I took all of it. And no one texted me. No one had an emergency. No one bothered me while I was on vacation, right? And, here in this situation, if I don't do the work, no one does it for me. So I have to do it. So it's causing me stress. So, I've tried to take friends' weekends off, take vacation. I'm really trying hard to make an effort because, if I know that no one's going to do my work anyways, like I just have to find a way to make it work because I need to take time off. I need to rejuvenate, recover, all of those things. So, just doing little things like that. Another thing is I was feeling really caged into working from home. And like, I always had this sense of, oh, I don't want to go to a coffee shop or somewhere else because I have this full setup at home. I have a desk, I have my laptop with the holder and all the things, like, a full setup. And I was like, if I go somewhere else, it's just not the same. And there's people and it's noise. And I just wasn't flexible. And so I started going to a coffee shop every week for a couple of hours. And it made such a difference. Not only was I like getting out of the house, which as someone who works from home and pretty much just goes to the gym during the week, like I did need a little bit more interaction and like going out sometimes. But I'm also way more productive because I'm physically sitting somewhere. I have to get my work done. And it's okay that I don't have my mouse or, whatever, all the other gadgets that I normally have at home. It's okay. And, another thing is like I have a podcast and I'd feel as stressed to have an episode every single week because that's what I'm doing. And I set these rules for myself. But like one week I just couldn't because there were so many things and I was stressed. It's like, it's okay to push your podcast episode back a week. Like these are things I wouldn't even think about doing because I set these rules and regulations for myself. And I'm like, I have to do that. Like I have to do that as if I'm in corporate and someone's telling me, right? So it was crazy. And, I'm just like, these are things that I've really been working on the last few weeks, last like month or two, is just really reframing this, doing spontaneous things on the weekend, not feeling like I have to optimize every hour of every day. Like, as I'm recording this on a Monday. And yesterday was Sunday. And, I did have this stress in me during the day. I was like, oh my gosh, I have to cook today. And normally I just want to like get it over with so I can check it off a box. And I was like, no, I'm just going to chill in the morning. Then my husband and I went to go get lunch. And then we came home, we chilled some more. And then I didn't end up cooking till like 6:30 p.m., which is very unlike me. But I really tried to be like, you know what? I'm going to rest today. We've been busy all weekend, busy all week. Like, I just need some time as well to chill, sit on the couch, watch a show, whatever. Like, that's okay to do. And so really just like reframing these things. And, none of these things are super dramatic and that's kind of the point. But getting your spark back and me getting my spark back doesn't really require necessarily blowing up your life. Sometimes it's noticing the small things that you're doing and quietly choosing yourself instead of choosing everyone else or these like perceived things that you have to do. It's really just one decision at a time. And at the end of the day, I left corporate to be free. And then I built myself a cage, locked it from the inside, and I called it discipline, which didn't serve me and didn't serve anyone at the end of the day. So where is it that you might be doing this? Okay. So this is really what you can start to think about and questions you can start to ask yourself of where might you be doing this in your day-to-day, and how can you stop, basically? So question 1 is, are you showing up to things when you feel 100% ready? And if you're only showing up to things when you feel 100% ready, then you're never going to leave, right? Like that was me too. And I was like, oh, when I'm 100% done with my work, or when I have a slow day, then I'll go hang out with my friends, or then I'll do these things, or then I'll go on vacation. But it's like those things will never happen. So how can I still do those things that make me happy, that I love, without feeling 100% ready? Because again, what does that even mean, right? You kind of have to reframe what that even looks like. Maybe your version of 100% isn't the same version of 100% now, right? So we have to look at that. The next questions you can ask yourself are you creating deadlines that don't exist? Urgency manufactured because structure feels safer than freedom, even when freedom is what you said you wanted. Oof, this is such a good one. This is me in a nutshell, right? Like I love a deadline. I love checking things off a list. I love just saying like, oh, I've completed said topic. And I will create deadlines for myself, and then I'll like force myself to stick to them for literally no reason. And, it is a form of control. It's a form of feeling safe, right? That makes me feel safe. I would say it makes my nervous system safe, right? And, it literally is the expression of like putting yourself in a cage, and you lock the door and you have the keys in your hand, but you're like in a cage and you're like, you can't get out. It really is what it is. Like I left corporate because I was tired of only being able to travel those 4 weeks of the year that I had vacation, of having to sit at my desk from 9 to 5 every single day, of not having flexibility, to go do things, or if I'm in a different time zone to work at different times. Like that's why I left, and I created a life that actually allows me to do things when I want to, and yet I'm still forcing myself into the 9 to 5, and then I work after that. And it's like I'm creating these scenarios and deadlines that literally don't even exist. They're not real. They're invisible. No, like I'm creating them for myself. The next question is, are you available in exactly the way you were before you made the change that was supposed to give you more flexibility? Did you recreate the cage in a new location? I just laugh because these are just like, I resonate with obviously that's why I picked these questions, but I resonate with all of them. And yeah, I remember when I left corporate, now this was almost 3 years ago, which is crazy. Actually 4. Oh my God, it was 4 years ago. That's even crazier. So I remember when I left corporate, I literally had this feeling of like, oh my God, I need to be by my desk and work from 9 in the morning until 5. Like I felt so stressed, even though there was literally nothing that was keeping me there. And I was like, oh, I can't go do this. I can't go do that. I was feeling so anxious and so stressed and so unbelievably like caged and paralyzed, I would say is a good word, by the trauma that I had in corporate, or the structure that I had in corporate, that I literally could not uncage myself. I was like so rigid. I felt like I couldn't move. I always say that I felt like at that time that I was like stuck in my apartment, but like no one was making me stay stuck in my apartment. I felt like I wasn't getting outside. I kept like looking outside and I'm like, oh, I want to be there. I want to be outside. And like I could just walk out the door, and I wasn't doing it. So I was recreating that same scenario because it felt safe, because that's what I knew. Even though it's not what I enjoyed, it was what I knew, and my body felt safe doing it. So I recreated that. The next question you can ask yourself is, are you saying no to things that would actually fill you up, not because you're busy, but because showing up feels like too much effort or too much exposure? So this was really big for me when I was kind of burning out doing my freelance work and my business and everything. I would say no to hanging out with friends because I just felt like I did not have energy for that. I had so much energy that I expelled on my work that I felt like I just didn't have energy besides that to be with my friends. And there was a time period where like I was barely hanging out with people. I wasn't making time. I was like, oh my God, I absolutely cannot go to lunch for an hour in the middle of the day. Like I don't have time for that. Like I just was like, no, no, no. It was causing me so much stress. So I really had to work on setting boundaries with my work first. That was like the first thing, is setting boundaries with my work, not overdoing it, having a daily limit, or maybe like picking like 1 or 2 days a week where I do a lot more work. And then the other days I have the opportunity to spend time with friends, or, go to the gym longer, or in the summer, go to the pool for like a couple hours, right? Like those are all things that I really wanted to make sure I had the capacity to do. And then once I did have the capacity and I was not burned out and I made time and I really, looked at my schedule, then I was able to have the capacity again for my friends. And I really felt that shift over the last 6 months. And then the last question is, are you waiting to feel better, look better, feel more confident, feel more ready before you let yourself actually live? Oof. That waiting for that is not self-care. It's avoidance dressed up as self-care. So this is me. So, I've talked a lot about my body image issues and things that I've had around that. And I remember during COVID, and I've shared this before, is like I ended up gaining some weight in COVID because like I was literally cooking all the time. I was so bored. I was baking, cooking, eating, totally normal. And yeah, I like was in a little bit of a bigger body. And I remember I think it was a combination of obviously being locked at home and not being around people, but also my body image. I was like, oh my God, I can't go on the street. Everyone's going to look at me. Everyone is going to see what I look like. They're going to judge me. And I would not dress in a certain way that I actually wanted to. I would not go out as much. I would cover myself up. I would feel not great about leaving the house. I wasn't open to like certain, dating and things like that because I felt so unbelievably uncomfortable with being around people and being in social settings. And I was just waiting to be in a smaller body or feel more confident before I actually lived my life. And I remember it really did paralyze me that summer. I did have a lot of like issues with how I was feeling. And obviously I was going through a breakup. So that was tumultuous. And so there was just like so many feelings of unworthiness and wanting to be perfect and wanting to look a certain way, wanting to be a certain way before I actually spent time with people and had fun. So that was really hard to do. And I really had to work on my self-care. And COVID is really when I started my self-care journey and my mindset journey. That's when I learned about meditation and breath work and all of those things, affirmations, working with the therapist is when I started in 2020. Really all of those things to really get to a place where I could start feeling confident regardless of the body I'm in, regardless of how I'm dressed, regardless of those things. And that was like a really big thing for me. So, I really want you all to feel great in what you're doing. And I want you to notice what's happening in your life. And again, this isn't about doing like a whole overhaul necessarily, but how to find your own version of getting your sparkle back, how to find your own version of saying yes. So you really want to understand like why you're saying no to things. Is it coming from a place of fear, fatigue, body image, not feeling ready, not wanting to be seen imperfectly? These are all things that I want you to start thinking about when you're saying no to things that could actually help you. And the test to this is, would the version of you that felt her best say yes to this situation? And if the answer is yes, and the current you is saying no, then that's worth, paying attention to. And it's really about starting small, right? It's about doing small things that scare you. It's not about having a grand gesture. It's about just going to a coffee shop for an hour once a week. It's about going to that last minute dinner you were invited to. It's going on that trip even though you have a lot of work. Like it's just doing those smaller things so that you can start helping your body and your nervous system see that it's okay. And of course, like nervous system regulation is super important and really helpful. I do it and it's super helpful for me and doing that mindset work. But it really is about doing those small things, right? And giving yourself grace. It's okay to not be perfect. In fact, I think that perfection is unattainable and we shouldn't even be looking up to the word perfection or perfectionism or any of those things because it just is not something that really works for us and that's helpful for us. And I just want to give you permission to really think about these things and think about what works for you. Think about why you're saying no to things. Think about what it is that would actually bring you joy. Like, what are those things? And what are those things that you're doing to keep yourself in a quote unquote cage and not let yourself be free, right? So I just want to give you permission to give yourself permission to work differently, to push back on things that don't align, to not be available every hour if that's possible, to trust the work that, you're going to get done is in your 9 to 5, to trust that if you go on vacation, nothing's going to blow up, right? To trust that you can work 1 hour in the coffee shop, whatever it is, like all of those things is just kind of trusting yourself. And, again, this all goes back to this spark of like getting your spark back. That's really how I look at it, because I feel like, again, I was just in this hole of just focusing on work, overdoing it, burning out, saying no to things that would actually bring me joy and make me happy. And so it really is for me about getting my spark back this summer in every way, physically, emotionally, mentally. That's really what my goal is after like a challenging period. And, it doesn't have to be a traumatic overhaul. It's just a series of small choices that you make, of saying what you want, of wanting things, of looking at what would actually make you happy, of building a life that feels good, not just one that looks productive. Because at the end of the day, and I really feel this on your deathbed, you are not going to think about how productive you were. You're going to think about how joyful you were, how much you enjoyed life, the people that you were around. And that's what's really important at the end of the day. So, this is my last summer here, and I'm choosing to be present, and that's what I want to do moving forward. And I hope this is inspiring for all of you, regardless of where you are, is just to think about those things that make you happy and how you can make the most of your life rather than putting yourself in cages, and really thinking about what it is that you can do, even if it's small micro things, to start feeling more like yourself, or doing things that are helpful to you, or saying no to things that don't serve you, and just really prioritizing yourself and what makes you happy and joyful, I think is really, really important. So I hope that this is helpful. Some tips, more of like a theoretical conversation, but I think it's so important. And especially as women, I know this is something a lot of us struggle with. And, we have ebbs and flows in our life, and that's totally normal. And we're relearning things. And, we've been taught things as a child that we're relearning. There's just so many factors, which is totally normal. And I just want to normalize that it's okay to take an audit of your life and see what's working, see what's not, and really understand what's going to make you happy and joyful at the end of the day, because that's what's going to matter. That's what's going to matter at the end of this. So if this podcast episode was inspiring, please share it with someone that you love. I would really appreciate it. And of course, a 5-star review is always, always appreciated. I hope you all have an amazing week, and I'll catch you in the next episode.